Galloway.
Okay. But this is the EIE College Prep English class, and I think we're live and running. Okay, we're going to start discussing our material now. Let me fix that up. Okay, and should be sharing the screen. Okay, let's go on to what your question was.
No, I just noticed in the debate that they pretty much were constantly attacking each other.
Absolutely, absolutely.
George Galloway and Christopher Hitchens, I think.
It was an interesting debate in that respect, in that they had been former colleagues and pretty much on the same side of issues.
Yeah, like what
totally different
Galloway
directions.
mentioned.
Right, and so he is metamorphosed from a butterfly to a slug. Okay, you can't get more ad hominem than that.
Yeah, and then he goes, "I remember when you used to be on my side," and then I do not remember the year, and then what's the guy's name?
Hitchens
yeah.
comment about drinking.
Yeah, he replies to Hitchens, says, "Probably because of the whiskey."
It could be. Indeed, he was known to be a serious drinker. What was interesting about that is it was indeed a debate. At least they had
At least they put
speaking,
points,
then the other person speaking.
At first, it looked good. Like the way Hitchens, there was nothing. Hitchens put his point, and then Galloway starts it. Then Hitchens starts fighting back, and then they're all at each other's throats.
Yes. Yeah. I enjoy listening to Hitchens just because he wields the language so well.
Yeah,
he
did
has
better
all
than
of the words at his disposal, and it's really on an entirely different level than Galloway. Whether you agree with him or not, that's a totally different thing. But indeed, how well did you think they put their points?
Hitchens did a better job of putting his point, as in he used much better language. He was much more fluent at speaking. Galloway just immediately went to attacking Galloway.
Yes.
To attacking Hitchens.
So that was his one fault in there. He spent more time trying to attack Hitchens. Galloway spent more time attacking Hitchens, his own views, than showing his view, presenting his view. He ended up more attacking. Hitchens.
And we will often find that that's the case when one watches a debate, that the two debaters, or there may be more than that, are not necessarily debating the same issues. In fact, they frequently end up mischaracterizing the position of their opponent, and then attacking something that isn't exactly what their opponent is purporting. And what is that called? Do you remember?
Straw man.
Straw man, exactly. And in some cases, I've been following speakers for some time, and I found a couple of wonderful speakers. Hitchens, of course. There's another one, David Berlinski, who does just a wonderful job with language. And at one point, I suddenly saw that they had arranged a debate between the two of them. I think, okay, that's going to be fascinating. And watched it. It's out there on YouTube. I invite you to watch it. The problem is the two of them just don't agree on what the issue is that they are debating. And they miss each other completely with their arguments. It was still fascinating to watch, but it really just didn't work as a debate as such. Now, what about the, I'm going to take us to our agenda so that we can see what's going on here, and it will take a moment perhaps to get things to work. Okay, well, let's just we looked at, let's see, there we are. We're just talking about debate here, the debates that I have assigned. I'm going to leave that picture up there, something to look at. But the other debate I gave you was called a debate, and that was between Buckley and Chomsky. But it wasn't a debate at all, was it?
No.
No, it was Chomsky's show, and I'm sorry, it was Buckley's show,
Buckley,
yeah.
and Chomsky was a guest, and Buckley never let him finish a sentence. In fact, he said that at one point.
Yes.
So that was not really a formal debate of any sort. In fact, if we wanted to have a debate, we should have a specific period allotted for.
Those are always the best ones, when someone talks and then the other talks and then they both argue afterwards.
Right.
Instead of in the middle.
I still think a little bit of consideration is called for there, because when they spend so much time talking over each other, it really just damages the experience for the audience, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just terribly unfortunate.
Just like when you sometimes, if you're watching, for example, politicians debate, a lot of times they will allow each other to speak, but more often they would end up just attacking each other, interrupting, and then everyone just talks at once and you can't really understand what anyone's saying.
Exactly. And there is an art to that as well. If you follow the good debaters, you will notice that they will not allow themselves to be interrupted. And that's a very hard thing to do. It's very hard to do because somebody is speaking over you as you're trying to finish a sentence and maybe trying to make a very salient point. And there's this interruption. And what one needs to train oneself to be able to do is take that section of what one needs to say that has been obliterated by the other person's speech and grab hold of it, continue to say it loud enough so that what the other person is saying isn't coming through. And then once the person does finally give up, remember where you are and be able to continue. That's the hard part. I mean, you can shout against somebody else forever if you like, but usually if you end up winning the shouting match, one tends to have a long period of dead air while you try to figure out where you were. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. So you have to hold on to that idea of where you were so you can pick it up and go along with it. And there are some of these, Hitchens does that probably better than anybody I know. He won't allow an interruption and it'll just keep on going and making the interruption pointless. And then eventually, when he gets an opportunity, he can continue on with the point he was trying to make. It's still not polite, but interruptions. It takes me off onto a tangent here, but one of the biggest problem with modern technology is interruptions. So many discussions, so many interviews are taking place over the internet through video conferencing, and they can have as much as 3 seconds delay. And so if the interviewer chooses to interrupt the interviewee in the middle of a sentence, you've got an enormous amount of overlap while the two of them are talking together.
Yes.
It takes that long for the interviewee to know that the interruption is taking place. And so it's a dreadful experience, I think, for the listener. And they haven't figured this one out yet. But very clearly, they need to develop a set of signals if they're going to have that kind of delay. They have to have an arrangement in which the interviewer will, for example, show a sign, a visible sign. It's a video conference after all, letting the person know that he's going to be interrupted in 3 seconds. So bring it to a close. You see what I mean? That way, it would at least avoid that kind of cross-chatting.
Yeah, the cross in the middle.
But maybe the technology will solve the problem more rapidly. There was a debate recently, well, not a debate so much as a presentation. It was done in New Zealand, and it involved participants in Russia and the UK. I think I mentioned it to you. But it used a new technology, and there was almost no delay at all. I don't know how they did it. So who knows? They might solve the delay problem. Okay, let's look at our agenda and ask, first of all, is there anything specific anyone would like to cover that we haven't been covering? Dawson, do you need ideas to come up with for putting together some sort of composition?
I don't really think so.
Okay, great. The request earlier was that we focus more upon fiction, which I don't mind doing, but of course I realize that you're more interested in putting together nonfiction narrative and that which is called for a admission. And so I want to make sure to cover what you need to cover there. But if I can see an example of what you want to try to do, and we can work from there and expand upon it. That sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, let's look at our agenda here. Debate. We weren't able to come up with a solid debate topic last time, and Martin came in and suggested, okay, give them something. Okay, I'll give them something. And so I suggested, this sounded like a good one. It is appropriate to censor certain things in the media. That's the proposition right there. Can we take both sides of that? Now you've both prepared something here. You got something in mind? Okay. Would you like to do a pro and you like to do a con, and we'll just do about a minute each and see where we end up.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. Well, I believe it is appropriate to censor certain things in the media, specifically things that are for older audiences. Like, for example, you wouldn't want a child to see an adult rated movie or something that adults should only see. For that reason, I believe that certain things in the media should be censored.
Okay. Do you want to expand upon that list of things that require censorship?
No, that's not the only one I could think of.
Okay. Okay. Con.
Yes. I believe that if you choose to censor media, you are destroying the right to free press. Our country has been founded on the ideals that the press is allowed to put whatever they want. Let it be, for example, we can use Snowden. That NSA, that's something for the people to decide. The people should decide whether this NSA security tracking, they need to decide. And it's not America's right, the government's right to censor this media off.
Okay, interesting point. Let me throw out a question or two. Suppose it comes down to the mechanics of bomb making. Do you think that's something that should be freely available and searchable on the internet? Let me address this one to Connor.
Yeah. This is a very difficult question because it's videos like these that can lead to terror. But if you were to censor this, we should be able to censor these and dangerous, but we should not be able to censor media that is freely given that is not harmful. We should be able to do whatever we want, view whatever we want, when we want, as long as it does not harm America, our country.
Okay, we're deciding on specific criteria that make certain things acceptable and other things not. So in other words, you're conceding that some things should be censored.
I guess.
Okay. On the other side, let me ask the big question. Who should be responsible for making these decisions? And should it be done in the dark, or should it be done in a public forum?
I believe that whatever the media should censor, the government should give a rule telling, like a guideline, outlaying all of like the things that should be censored, and leave it to the media, the company, whoever is broadcasting, to decide what to censor, what not to censor.
We should trust the media with
yes,
with
because
that
the media
decision.
is like the people. It's safer than letting the government decide what to censor and what not to, because that could be
indeed,
corrupted.
if the government does it and doesn't let anybody know, including Congress, what it is they're doing, which is one of the big questions. Very good. A couple of points I wanted to make about this, initial debate, we shouldn't really start out with, I think that, because after all, we don't know whether you think that. You're taking a position which could arbitrarily have been on either side of the issue. What one needs to do instead is present arguments in favor of one side, rather than express an opinion on the part of the debater. There are a number of other little turns of phrase there that I would like to have corrected and interrupted, but I don't think interruption would have been appropriate. But I'd like to address them as we go along and see if we can't raise the level of formality. I don't necessarily aspire to anything like Hitchens or Miller, but I think we can get closer than we are now when it comes to conforming to standards, stylistic and grammatical. Okay, wonderful. That was a nice idea. Did you have any comments, Dawson?
No.
Okay. I would like to find some more things that we can delve into. Of course, this one could be taken much further if we wanted to. I don't know how much interest it is to you folks, but I'd like to find some other debates, and you have that list of debate topics. Please come up with one that you would really like to jump into. Now, here's another question. Would you two have preferred perhaps to take the opposite side in that debate?
No. I'm fine either way. So. Yeah, I could switch.
Okay, very, very good. Yeah, there are so many issues involved there. And the big issues, of course, are who makes the decisions. Once you've put the mechanism in place to censorship, and it's already there. I'm afraid it's already there even here, but it's certainly there in Iran. It's certainly there in China. It's certainly the question
we
is
should not do anything like that. I would agree with my brother saying media should be censored through public polls, public surveys saying, what do you think we should censor? For example, you don't want anyone, no one should see the beheading of a journalist on YouTube. That's just not something that everyone needs to know.
Violence, sexual content, that's what we're talking about. What if a page came up online with photographs of undercover agents?
So that should be censored because that endangers the lives.
Who's going to make the determination on that one?
The public should still, but I'm pretty sure the public.
It's hard for the public to do that if they don't want these things to be public.
That's a good point.
Okay. I'm just coming up with some difficult wrinkles here.
Yeah. See, that is tricky because you don't want to endanger the lives of all those spies. They'll be in trouble as soon as the pictures come out.
Right, and there may well be others, but those are already being censored as far as one can tell. Search around the internet, see if you can find any. If you can't find any, there's a good chance that they're not in the main search engines anymore. They may be off in the dark web somewhere, but I don't know very much about that. Okay, Macefield's Guide to Shakespeare Plays. I suggested that we look at that just as a quick overview to determine which plays we wanted to do, but we've already decided that, at least for the first one. We've decided on Macbeth. A whole lot of things to say about Macbeth. Let me determine first whether there's anything we need to cover before we dive into Macbeth, but I think perhaps we ought to go ahead and look at assignments that have been handed in first and then do it. Essay writing, this is just repeated material that I had up there before, if anybody would like to expand more upon that. And I don't think there's any better way to study the writing of essays than to read the ones that have won, to read the best ones. And that's what this is all about. Dawson, did you get a chance to get that book?
I'm still waiting for it.
Yeah, I'm sorry to have to ask you to do that, but I just can't find it anywhere else, and it's just so good. The essays in it, was really impressed by. And the main thing I was impressed by was not so much the content, although that goes in various different directions, and sometimes it's contradictory and sometimes it's ambling, but if it's well stated, that seems to be the distinction between the ones that win and the ones that don't, and that's what we're working on. Okay, the query letter, let's hang on to that and talk about it later. That was on the agenda last week and we didn't get to it. Specifically, it would be nice to write some things and get them published. There are different ways to do that. One straightforward way to do it would be EIE is starting up a new blog, and they haven't really made an effort to request submissions, but let's go ahead and provide submissions, and let's do it the formal way, and that is with a query letter. If you write something fictional, query letters don't make a lot of sense because you can't really explain what fiction is going to be and how good it's going to be in a query letter. But if you're going to be discussing a specific issue, or you're going to be creating something informative or a position paper, then a query letter makes a lot of sense. You can define, for example, what it is you're going to be writing about, why it's particularly appropriate right now, and why it's appropriate to this audience, and then more details about exactly what it will contain and who you are and why you're competent to write it. And that's basically the essence of a query letter, and that's the basis upon which one can get the go-ahead from a publication to write something. It's sort of nice to know that there's somewhere it's going to be published when you start writing, rather than writing something on spec and then trying to find something for it afterwards. So anyway, let's talk about that later on, and I'll be glad to discuss it. Chapters 1 and 2 in the text. We have a textbook that covers all of the major mistakes that the students tend to make, and also style and grammar. And I don't believe in dwelling upon those issues particularly, because I think that they will solve themselves if you immerse yourself in the language of the masters. And it's always nice to understand what the terminology is and how to describe sentences and how to describe the devices used and the expressions. But that's secondary. First of all, we want to get an intuitive feel for using those devices. And that's what we're going to be doing most of. Does anybody have any questions about the issues that were raised in chapters 1 and 2? Okay, chapter 1 is a big one and an important one. And that one is how to determine what standard usage is. There are a number of other tools out there online that I can introduce you to if you'd like. But when you're looking at a phrase and you're trying to determine, is this a good phrase? Is this an effective way to express myself? Then it's nice to be able to sample that body of material, which is the internet or any subset thereof, to determine the frequency of usage. And that's what that first chapter does. Did any of you, I know you've gone through it already, but did you get a chance to try any of that to determine, for example, was beholden 4, beholden 2, which one is more common?
No, I haven't tried that yet.
Okay, let's give that a shot at some point, because the easy way to do it is stick them in quotes, Google it, look at the count. And that gives you everything. I mean, that'll be all of classical literature, all of the, young journalism and everything else. But then if you want to, you can limit your search to just a specific country, or you can limit your search to just universities. And that way you can get a very good concept of common usage. And so that's the big point in chapter 1 that I want to make sure everybody got. Chapter 2 just goes on to some specific usage problems. Okay, we'll go ahead and look at MacBeth later on. We've already talked about Buckley and Chomsky, and indeed they are both much, much younger there. Buckley, of course, is no longer with us. Chomsky is still going strong. Now, who is Chomsky, by the way? Does anybody know?
Isn't he a journalist or like?
He's a writer, not so much a journalist.
Oh,
Above all, Chomsky is the father of modern linguistics. He is, or was a professor at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and he developed the theory that we use now. Transformational regenerative grammar is what it's called, and it was a major leap in language concepts. It's rather interesting, however, to watch him debate against Buckley, who wields the language so much better. I'm sorry. Chomsky is a professor. He's the originator of modern linguistics. One would expect him to be a master of the language, but I'm afraid he doesn't really do the job with it that some of the others do. He's written dozens and dozens of books, most of them from the perspective of an American dissident, which is the way he describes himself. Okay, Buckley, on the other hand, very conservative, but a brilliant user of language, whether you agree with him or not. Okay, language immersion. Now here is somebody who uses language absolutely superbly all the time. You can't tell when he's off book or on script, and he doesn't seem to make a distinction between the two. He's done a number of documentaries, some of which may not be entirely appropriate or indeed interesting in the class, but his language is always so utterly superb that listening to him will just do your ears a lot of good. You did watch The Zoo in Winter. I know you've seen it already.
I've watched some of it.
Pretty much all of it. I thought his language was
His
really
language
well.
was really good.
It was very fun to listen to him.
It's fun. I think that's a good way to put it, because somebody is just says everything so beautifully. Of course, he's also done so many other things. In this one, of course, he manages to mimic what so many of these animals are doing in the zoo, and he just does it so wonderfully because he's quite an actor. But he started out as a neurologist, an MD, and then he went off into other fields, and he's done some wonderful things. So one of the major works that he did was called The Body in Question, and I would recommend it to you if you're at all interested in that kind of thing. It's about physiology and anatomy and medicine, all written by him, an expert in the field, and presented by him, a master of language. And so it's just an absolutely wonderful presentation. There, he's done a number of other things as well, but this one is just a lot of fun. This is one of his earlier works. So if you'd like more of him, I will bring him in. As you say, it is fun, and then we're off to older assignments. Good. Let's go over here.
I just know something interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting that it
the
was
screen
able.
share shows it.
It shows the next one, the one that
Yeah.
I'm trying to switch to, and this one doesn't yet. There we go. Okay, that's not really where I wanted to go. I wanted to go here. And this is Kyle's chapter. Now, when did you write this?
I wrote it maybe like a month ago, but then a week or two ago I rewrote it because I didn't like the way I was writing the sentences. So I just revised it.
Mm-hmm. Has anybody else gone through it with you?
I did.
Okay.
Connor read it when I finished the chapter.
Very good, because it really does look as though it's been polished and edited. It's nicely done. There are suggestions I wanted to make though, and let's take a look at these. I can't really say enough about how nicely written it is. It's very compelling, very nicely done, and it's hard for me to give credit for something like that because at this point we're just setting the bar, trying to figure out where everybody stands, and yeah, you hand in an entire chapter and a nicely written chapter. How many project points will that get? On the one hand, that makes things difficult. On the other hand, that's exactly what I'm aiming at. And what I've always said at the beginning of every class, I assume I've already said it, I will say it again, and that is, this is a fascinating topic. It's a delightful study. And if I can get you to understand and appreciate that and jump into it the way I feel it deserves, then I don't have to worry about grades and you don't either. And so that's the way I feel about looking at this. If I end up having to do bean counting the way they do with the SAT essay, then I'll count projects and tally them up. But this is absolutely wonderful. I don't know how many points to give it. I don't want to give it too many points because I still want to give you some incentive to write some more. And so we've got to figure out a solution to that. My suggestions were, there were some mechanical things. The biggest one, my biggest problem with it, I think, was it's in very standard language. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's used all the time on the street, just used all the time in journalism. But it becomes a little bit prosaic after a while to see the same simple and relatively meaningless words being used again and again. And so I made some suggestions about alternative vocabulary that might work better. Let's look at some examples here. Also, the repetition existed in here. That's something in English we always want to try to avoid if we can. And try to transcend stagnant vocabulary, that's what I was talking about, and specific stylistic errors. Let's take a look at those. Nicely done. Good use of adjectives in description. Then when you say here, he instantaneously felt a great amount of shame. There's got to be better ways to put it than that. You see my point. So yes. Perhaps he was sorely ashamed, was remorseful, mortified, contrite. These are all other words that might make that work a little better. You see my point, rather than a great amount of. Okay. Still remained in the same decimated building since last night. The actual origin of the word decimated means to reduce in size by 1/10. That's where the word comes from, as a decimal. But of course, that's not the meaning it still has. It has become to mean to severely reduce in numbers, not just 1/10, but to reduce in numbers, usually in numbers, however. So when one's talking about a building, it doesn't really apply very well. So I suggested damaged, ravaged, wrecked, ruined. Look in your thesaurus. Now, one of the things that I intend to do, I don't want to take the time for it right now, but I would like really to recommend that you put on your computers a little plug-in. I'm sure it's available for Chrome. I use it in Firefox. It's a dictionary lookup tool. And it gives you room for 6 different dictionaries. And so you can just click on a word and it takes you off to wherever you want to. It gives you a right-click menu, and you can go off to different dictionaries. Now I'll give you some of those dictionaries that I think are excellent. TFD is one of the best, the free dictionary, tfd.com. But there are some others that are superb. I have difficulty finding 6. I keep on having to rotate them and put others in there. But there's some wonderful resources. Okay, this didn't work at all. When you said blood was stained on the dull shattered. Well, you could say it was blood stained, or you could say blood stained it, but blood was stained on. You see that doesn't really work. So I suggest it was stained with blood. That's very, very simple, and I'm afraid very common. But there would be so many other ways to put it. Blood was stained on simply does not follow standard English collocation. Collocation is the use of words together. Okay, now here's a tricky one. You say, this is all in past tense. He glanced at his stepsister, who was eagerly awaiting her breakfast. She already folded her blanket. Okay, what we're talking about there is we're in the past tense, and we're talking about somebody who has done something further in the past than simply the past tense. You need past perfect for that.
I put that in. I remember putting that. Said she had. I'm like, and I looked at it. She had done. I'm like, that just deleted it because I was unsure.
Okay, well now you know.
Yes, now
Now you know. If you have to talk about the past and then talk about something further in the past, it's past perfect. Okay, and you notice there's very little here that really deserves. It's very nicely polished. He started a small fire which lit up the dark, obliterated coffee shop. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing wrong with the word dark. But dark is a common word, and you might be able to find a more interesting one. So I just threw in dim. It's the adjectival word between the world and the underworld. Very, very black. And these, of course, are much less common words. Tenebrific and remember that really probably. How many of you have ever seen the old classic movie, The Wizard of Oz?
My sister watches it a lot of times.
It's used in there oddly. The wizard himself uses the word colliginous. He doesn't use it correctly. It's rather out of place where he uses it, but it's there. And of course, it simply means dark, and so does tenebrific or tenebrous. Okay, just alternative words. Now here, for example, we've got this can of soup popping up. We've got soup, and if you can avoid using repeating it, you can call it repast, you can call it meal, you can call it supper, whatever you like, as long as you don't use the same word again. Okay, let's see. And then here, he started to dawdle cautiously towards the entrance. Well, dawdle, I think, doesn't mean quite what you were thinking. Dawdle tends to be a deliberate waste of time, which I don't feel is what he was necessarily intending. But to creep or slip or edge cautiously toward the entrance sounded a little better to me. And then we've got the trusty Bowie knife, and that Bowie knife keeps on popping up with the entire word Bowie knife each time. One could simply refer to it as the knife, or refer to it as the weapon, or it, or whatever, rather than avoid. If you've got something with that long a word attached to it, you've already established what it is. You don't have to keep on saying it. Okay, a large blood-stained road. Yes, of course it can be blood-stained, as we had up above, but I suggested perhaps blood-encrusted, congealed, ensanguinated. I made that to sounded right, and then I looked it up and find it is indeed a word, and it means exactly what I wanted it to. It means bloodstained, but it's sort of a nice word to have handy. We'll encounter it later. Do you remember having encountered not as ensanguinated, but consanguineous last year?
Yeah.
Do you remember who said it?
No.
That was Sir Toby Belch in Twelfth Night. We had that word. Okay. Anyway, just alternative suggestions for words. Now, here's a big error. Now, I won't say it's a big error because it's a very common error, and that is when we talk about. I'll read the original here. The west side of the city was less populated, which meant less of them. Now, we still don't know what they are.
Yeah,
We've gone through the entire chapter, and there's some pernicious entity out there, or entities, and we have no idea what they are.
Yeah, it's supposed to be revealed like in the further chapters, which I haven't written yet.
Well, the problem is that they're probably distinct entities. They're not necessarily some conglomerate, and therefore they are a count noun rather than a mass noun. Do you understand the distinction there? Because this is a problem that it's a much bigger problem for non-English speakers than it is for English speakers. But a lot of people don't understand that you cannot use the word less with a count noun, or really should not. The word is fewer. But the other end, we can say more for either one of them. It's just that when we're talking about less or fewer, we have to distinguish between count nouns. There's less water in the cup, and there are fewer pencils on the table. We're not allowed to say there's less pencils on the table. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. Very nicely done. Very little to say about this, except that I think we're all looking forward to the next chapter. Do you understand all of the suggestions here?
All except the first one. I don't know. Like when you do past perfect, and then there's like past. I think isn't there like progressive, and then perfect, and then
you're absolutely
there's like
right. Those
I've forgotten the differences between them.
We will look at those if you're interested. In fact, I have a computer program that I've handed out that takes you through these and explains exactly, not necessarily the semantics, but the syntax of all of them by formula. And it's actually, this is a program that will conjugate all the verbs and create all the possible verb phrases, including all of the combinations of perfect, passive, and progressive. But it does it all by formula. And the only actual data that it has is the three principal parts of the irregular verbs, demonstrating that it can be done that way, that it actually lends itself to an algorithm.
I read a few in chapter 2. They gave a few examples of like each one, I think, like later on, like at the end of the chapter. So that kind of helps too.
Great. Yeah, it's not at all important for you to have that algorithm in your head, but it's important for your intuitive language sense to have grasped it and be able to use it. Okay, and Connor, here's this is sort of the sized essay I was rather more expecting. And again, we're setting the bar. Good premise, arguments, and conclusion. I talk about the synesis error which you commit. Try not to use second person when giving directions. If you get a complex device of some sort and you pull out the instructions, I'm assuming here that it's not Chinese, and the instructions are well written, they won't probably use the second person. They won't say, you do this. They say that screws should be removed, remove these screws, and then you can pull this part back, or this part can be pulled back, rather than using the second person. It's perfectly acceptable and perfectly understandable, but it lowers the tone. It lowers the formality.
Yeah, because you're trying to refer to that, to someone.
Right, and you have no idea who the reader is going to be. Okay, this is another question I had about it. You're talking here about the distinction between being honest and poor or dishonest and rich, and implying that those are the two choices. And perhaps
those were they're saying if you had to pick between the two, was the question I was given on the debate list.
Yeah, exactly. Very good point. I should blame the debate list and not the writer in this particular case. But the other question is it possible to be both honest and wealthy?
I was thinking of putting like a few sentences or like a in parentheses, of course, being honest and rich would be the best outcome, but if you had to distinguish between the two.
Well, it is a question, because so much that has to do with the accumulation of wealth tends to verge on the less than entirely honest. And so that's one of the questions. Also, the question is, well, when one is in a position to consider purchase of one second Porsche, how many children's lives could one save with that amount of money somewhere else? That sort of question comes up, whether whether there's a better way to handle that sort of thing. Okay, let's look at it. Does one judge themselves? Now, here you see that makes your tongue go numb, doesn't it? Okay, so we've got one, which is clearly singular, and themselves, which is clearly plural. And that mismatch is called synesis. Now, there are certain kinds of synesis errors that have become very, very common, specifically because we don't really have a third person generic pronoun for singular without specifying gender. So everyone in class should have his pencil handy. Well, class may have girls in it. Everyone in class should have his or her pencil handy. That's awkward. Everyone in class should have their pencil handy. That's synesis. Everyone should have their, it's a number mismatch. And so there isn't really a good answer to that one. And his or her is the most correct answer, but probably it'd be better to rearrange the sentence and say, all the students in class should have their pencils handy.
All students should,
Right. So synesis is something that has been regarded by many as a non-error, but it's still regarded as an error as far as I know on the SAT. And so we have to watch that. Okay, and here I've continued to fix it. Family and honesty, no matter what monetary state, will always lead to happiness. No matter what is perfectly understandable and acceptable, but one raises the level slightly by saying regardless of monetary state. I just think it sounded a little better. And we want to avoid second person if possible. And here we've got another, no matter your wealth, despite one's wealth. Perhaps sounds better.
When I was going over it, I said there's probably a better way to say this, but I couldn't really. When I was looking at that, I said there's probably a better way to do this, but I couldn't think of a way to make it sound any better.
Mm-hmm. This I think sounds a little better.
Yeah, it does.
Now, if you wanted to be terribly obscure, you could say maugre oneself. That's the weird thing. That's a word you've probably never heard before. And what's odd is that the words that are most extensive in our vocabulary are verbs and nouns and adjectives. There's an awful lot of those. But there are not a lot of prepositions. There are only between 30 and 40 of them, on, by.
Yeah.
Maugre is a preposition. It's a preposition nobody uses, and it means despite. So we can just throw that into our list. Okay. You must always need to. Okay, clearly we've got some. This would be called a pleonasm. A pleonasm is simply a redundancy. You're saying something twice, and obviously in this case it's just a typo, but you see the point. You must always cover up your past deceptions with more lies. And this is not grammatical. This is simply semantic. I thought adding and perhaps other misdeeds. Okay, do you understand the difference between syntactic and semantic? Okay, semantic has to do with the meaning of what you're saying. Right? So in this case, I'm suggesting that besides just lying, you may actually end up having to murder people as well. Okay, which is since we're talking about Macbeth. Whereas syntactic has to do with the nuts and bolts of the language itself and the grammar. And so it's important to distinguish those two. They go together. Very nicely done. Nicely done. Okay, and as will usually be the case, I'll indicate one project for acceptable projects and keep a tally. And you should both have received a message from the classroom.
Yes.
With your tally, whereas yours is just. Well, we'll see where it goes. Okay, very nicely done. Okay, there was just one more thing that was handed in, and that was Diana's. And did anybody read this?
I read a little bit into it. This is the one that referred to The Great Gatsby. Right.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did.
I read into it until I saw Great Gatsby because I'm reading the Great Gatsby, or I've started reading it. So I was like, oh, I don't want to give away any spoilers.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure that it would be spoiled for you particularly, but the point she's making here, and she does a nice job of it, is success perhaps will likely lead to downfall, and I think she makes a very good point. But I suggested another one, which might actually be, some of you might find interesting. It's a movie called Home. It exists in its entirety on YouTube. And it's superbly photographed and researched. And I thought that Dinah might be more interested in the French version, or maybe even the Russian version. But it also exists in English and a number of other languages. And it addresses specifically this issue, but as it applies to an entire civilization rather than just an individual. Okay, did anybody have any comments on this one?
No.
Okay, well, one little point that that keeps reappearing here is the use or absence of the definite article, or indeed of any article. Now, in English, we are very arbitrary about the presence and absence of articles, but they have to be right. But there don't seem to be any very good rules that determine whether one should have an article on. Do you go to school or do you go to the school? Do you go to hospital or do you go to the hospital? In this country, you go to the hospital. In England, you go to hospital. In this country, you go to school, and you don't go to the school unless you're specifying a specific one. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Some words take articles and some don't. Turns out prohibition doesn't take an article. You talk about during prohibition, in the prohibition years. It doesn't take an article, so you don't say the prohibition, that time between the, what was it, the 18th Amendment and the 23rd Amendment, when that was, alcohol was banned. And it's just dropped its article. Oddly enough, for example, internet doesn't take an article, or does take an article.
Yeah.
Whereas it seemed to me that it shouldn't, but then it just became so obvious to everybody that one has to put a "the" in front of it. There's long lists of these, and they're largely arbitrary, though there are some rules. Okay, it is very irresponsible and selfish not to think about the future of our planet. I suppose I just threw this in to make it a little clearer who is being irresponsible about thinking of our planet for the sake of our children. Industrial success has led to environmental catastrophe. Nicely written. Diana writes very well. And she's tied it in well to them. Okay, let's go off onto other things, specifically the big one that we were going to talk about this week, and which you have all looked at. Okay, now in our MacBeth page, which I haven't brought up here, but you've looked at it, we have 2 videos of the entire MacBeth, one of them with Ian McKellen and Judi Dench, and the other one with, I had his name right on the top of my head a moment ago, and okay, doesn't matter. That one wasn't the good one. And in fact, it didn't get very good reviews, but it was up there in its entirety. So I thought I'd throw it. Jeremy Brett, famous actor, he's dead now. He has done many things. How many of you have actually seen the old movie, My Fair Lady? Never seen it? You've seen it.
Yeah.
He was Freddy in that one as a young man. And then he went on to become Sherlock Holmes in an entire series. So he's done a lot of interesting things, but he's a Brit and he's done a nice job. But I find it terribly incongruous to watch a presentation in which the sounds, the dialects, the accents are so disparate that they just don't make any sense. You've got people who have grown up in the same background, in some cases in the same family, who obviously grew up, when as soon as they open their mouths, you can tell they grew up on different continents. And I find that very incongruous. A lot of people don't seem to be bothered by that.
Yeah, my dad mentioned the same thing too.
Did he?
Yeah, when I was talking about him. Yeah,
with Jeremy Brett and Piper Laurie.
So plus it also makes it harder to just kind of picture the whole thing when everyone is different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very odd, especially when, I mean, it's as though you chose for members of the family, okay, well, here's the father and this son is black and that one's Chinese. I mean,
or
it's terribly incongruous. But when it comes to voices, most people don't seem to care that much.
There's a movie coming out that's based on Macbeth. It's an adaptation of it, and I think it's being made in London. You said,
Yeah.
It's called Enemy of Man, and because they have a larger budget and everything, everyone they hired are all Scottish. So during the entire, it helps you picture it better because everyone is speaking with a Scottish accent.
Scottish is wonderful. The problem is, of course, if it gets too Scottish, it's hard for anybody to understand, including the English.
Yes.
Yeah. And there were
talk
some
so
stops
fast.
in this one as well.
There are people who talk so fast in Scottish you can't even understand. I remember I was watching something with my dad, and they had all these Scottish guys on. They had one of them talking in their own dialect somewhere in Scotland, and they talk. It's English mixed with a little bit of Latin or something in it, Gaelic maybe, but they speak so fast you can't even tell what they're saying. But they're actually saying something.
It can be very hard to follow, and as I get older and my ears get older, I get much worse at it than I was before. But the Ian McKellen, Judi Dench one, of course, is superbly done.
Has great acting.
That they are wonderful. And of course, it's all in received pronunciation. That's sort of the standard pronunciation, the BBC pronunciation, if you like, which has in recent years been regarded perhaps as sort of old-fashioned and unnecessary. But that's the pronunciation which was standard when these were doing their schooling and their preparation. It's important perhaps to understand, although that's what we tend to associate with Shakespeare done well, that it developed during the 19th century and doesn't resemble Shakespeare's language at all. But we still associate that with Shakespeare because that's the accent in which we've heard it. It certainly seems to me to be much more comfortable than American, which doesn't make any sense either. But anyway, that's a different question. We've got a couple of wonderful actors and interesting things taking place there. I did some selections here. Let's just look through this one. Speak if you can. What are you? He's talking to the three witches.
Three witches.
And he gets this portent, this vaticination from the witches. It's all hail Macbeth, hail to thee, Thane of Glamis. Well, he is Thane of Glamis. He knew that, but it's interesting that she knew that. All hail Macbeth, hail to thee, Thane of Cawdor. Now, that's very significant.
Because he didn't, like he said before, he said you might be able to see that I was the Thane of Glamis. But how did you know? How did you know about this? I'm not that. What about King? I'm not the king either.
Indeed. So he has to regard this as an adumbration, as a prophecy, and he takes it seriously because
It happened when
number 2 happened, so he's sort of assuming that number 3 might. Now, the motivation of the witches is interesting. We don't really know what it is, but they do start out with that fair is foul and foul is fair, which is an interesting construction in itself. It's called epinodos, which is the reversal of words in a sentence as one of the one of the devices, the rhetorical devices that we'll look at rhetorical devices later on, perhaps. Knowing the names for them doesn't help you a lot, but it's sure nice to be able to use them. Reversing like that is epinodos. There's another name for it as well, so they're not unique. Another example of that might be, for example, Britannia rules the waves, but never waves the rules. Now, in some way, it actually makes sense. That one's very clever, but it's the reversal of the words. Okay, so background, just very roughly. Somebody want to explain what's going on here?
This is right before he kills the
attempts
king.
to kill.
Attempts to.
This is
Right.
This is correct. Yeah, this is the part where he's deciding whether or not. Or
Right. And now, who is MacBeth?
Macbeth was like
in the calendar. Are you saying in the play? Are you saying who's
Yeah,
playing?
I mean, what role is he playing? What personage is he? He's a member of the nobility.
Oh yeah,
He's
Scotland,
a
a thane,
in Scotland.
a commander,
a warrior.
Exactly, and apparently a very successful warrior and brave one.
Yeah, he was highly praised by the king.
Exactly. And so he comes across these witches. Now, without them, I mean, none of this would have happened.
Yeah,
But suddenly he gets this this portent that he will become Thane of Cawdor, and then he does. Because
and then
indeed,
he can't help but think if the next.
if that one was true, then the next one would be too. Thou shalt be king hereafter. Interesting. So the previous Thane of Cawdor was
He betrayed them fighting with the
he was
Norweed, fighting with them.
exactly
Yeah,
he
against the
was
Norwegians.
guilty of betrayal. His perfidy was noted, and what happened to him as a result?
He was executed. So they said, "Well, we will give the castle to Macbeth."
Exactly. So then he has done some soul searching. I don't know if you call it soul searching necessarily. He writes his wife a letter and explains what the witches have said, and his wife is all ready to encourage him in the black deed. He gets the opportunity to slay King Duncan, who comes to stay at his castle. And that, of course, is double betrayal in the sense that he is both his sovereign and his guest. And to slay him is a dreadful thing to do. And so he sees this apparition, this dagger, which I see before me, the handle toward my hand. Come, let me clutch thee. I have thee not, and yet I see thee still. Art thou not fatal vision, sensible to feeling as to sight? Or art thou but a dagger of the mind, a false creation, proceeding from the heat-oppressed brain? I see thee yet in form as palpable as this which now I draw. And he draws his dagger. Beautiful writing. Okay, I'm sure you all read through this, and so let's go ahead. I would like perhaps to just do a little bit of time we got? We've got time, good, to do a little bit of this part. We had some really good actors and actresses last year. It's a. Let's just look at this one here. Okay, so he does the deed, and Lady Macbeth says, and this is rather important, these deeds must not be thought after these ways, so it will make us mad. And indeed it does. She goes mad later on, and this is an amazing line here. Methought I heard a voice cry, "Sleep no more. Macbeth doth murder sleep. The innocent sleep, sleep that knits the ravelled sleeve of care, the death of each day's life, sore labour's bath, balm of hurt minds, great nature's second course, chief nourisher in life's feast." What wonderful words to describe sleep, and indeed sleep no more. Okay, now this is an interesting point. Who is Hecate? She is in the script.
She's one of the witches, isn't she?
In a sense, she's one of the witches. She is the goddess of witches.
Yeah, that's why I was assuming they kept talking to that person. It's like probably their goddess that they're talking to.
Right, but what's interesting here is she's often given short shrift in performances. And it's probably because the assumption is she was not a creation of Shakespeare. Well, we know she was a creation of Shakespeare. She's a Greek goddess with a speckled past of different directions and different traditions. But she, although she's in the first folio, which came out in 1623 or so, it's fairly clear that she did not play a role in the actual performance of the play, of which we don't have a script. And that would be the one that Shakespeare would have been involved in, which took place earlier. So it's a good bet that she was added later on. And that's probably the reason she's usually omitted in performances. But what she comes up with is rather interesting here. We've got these three witches who have provided this portent to Macbeth, and he of course is running with this, but it's not clear at that point that they're necessarily trying to deceive him. In fact, it's not clear at all that this portent might not, in fact, have been entirely straightforward. But Hecate comes along. And the first witch says, "Why, how now, Hecate? You look angrily." And then she has this soliloquy. And this soliloquy is so totally different from anything else. I haven't been able to find any commentary on this. I looked around for quite a bit. It's so totally different from Shakespeare. Because for one thing, this is not pentameter. And almost all of Shakespeare is in pentameter. 2 households, both alike in dignity, 5 feet to the line, in fair Verona where we lay our scene. From ancient grudge spring to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. Almost everything he wrote was in pentameter. This is tetrameter. And I looked at that. It's not weird. And also, it's all rhymed. But let's look at it for a second. This was probably not written by Shakespeare. Have I not reason, first of all, that they're accusing her or assuming that she is angry? She's angry. They say, are not angerly is the word they use. That's fine. And it's important to understand they did all kinds of strange adjectival things with nouns in their.
Yeah, like they use perfectist, like in Macbeth. I think it's like, it's in the beginning, but I kind of laugh when I read perfectist. It just sounded
Oh, perfectist? Yes, yes. Language had not solidified yet. The spelling certainly hadn't either. If you look at it in the original spelling,
Yeah.
all this had been
Like,
respelled.
look at the Canterbury Tales.
Well, that's even further back.
Yeah, so
But
further
the
you go back,
spelling
you know
in
this.
Shakespeare's time had still not been standardized in any sense. And so we look at standardized versions of it now, but at the time things were spelled in lots of different ways. Okay, so Hecate responds, "Have I not reason, beldams as you are?" That's a weird word. The original word in French, of course, beldame means beautiful lady, but it had already deteriorated in English usage to mean an old hag by the time this was used. "Have I not reason, beldams as you are, saucy and overbold, how did you dare to trade and traffic with Macbeth in riddles and affairs of death? And I, the mistress of your charms, the close contriver of all harms, was never called to bear my part or show the glory of our art." Oh, it's nice poetry. Very tetrametric, though. It's not pentameter. And it's all the syllables are in the right place and it rhymes. It's nicely put together. "And which is worse, all you have done hath been but for a wayward son, spiteful and wrathful, who, as others do, loves for his own ends, not for you. But make amends now, get you gone, and at the pit of Acheron meet me in the morning. Hither he will come to know his destiny. Your vessels and your spells provide, your charms and everything beside. I am for the air. This night I'll spend unto a dismal and fatal end. Great businesses must be wrought ere soon. Upon the corner of the moon there hangs a vaporous drop profound. I'll catch it ere it come to ground, and that distilled by magic sleights shall raise such artificial sprites, as by the strength of their illusion shall draw him on to this confusion. He shall spurn fate, scorn death, and bear his hopes but wisdom, grace, and fear. And you all know security is mortal's chiefest enemy." Wow. Interesting. It may not be Shakespeare, but it's certainly thrown some thoughts in there, and that's generally left out of productions. But it's beautifully done. And what is she saying?
She's upset that they like told him his fate in like riddles.
Right. See if you can avoid the likes. Okay. Yeah, indeed. And also did not confer with her.
Yeah.
And didn't allow her to demonstrate her art. And now she's going to lead Macbeth down the garden path, so to speak, and make sure he comes to a bad end by causing him to spurn fate and scorn death. In other words, giving him portents that make him think that he's invincible. And yet, as you know, security is mortal's chiefest enemy. So in thinking that he is secure, he will plow headlong into disaster. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. And this was sort of interesting because it's so often omitted, and it certainly makes a different flavor out of the whole concept of the portents, not born of a woman, and of Birnam Wood coming to Dunsinane. Well, those, of course, are portents that were intended, according to this, to mislead him and give him a false sense of security. Okay, the first witch, and here we call it again. Oh, the interesting stuff. "Thrice the brindled cat hath mewed, thrice and once the hedge pig whined. Hark her cries, 'tis time, 'tis time. Round the cauldron go, in the poisoned entrails throw. toad that under cold stone days and nights has 31 sweltered venoms. Boil thou first to the charming pot. Now, using simply I instead of in, still common in some dialects in England.
Just like they use like or, the O, E, and
Right.
R
Well,
for O.
very often the intervocalic V is omitted in lots of different words, like or, over, ne'er, never, ere, ever. That intervocalic V is very often omitted. Okay, second which fillet of a fenny snake in the cauldron boil and bake, eye of newt and toe of frog, wool of bat and tongue of dog, adder's fork and blind worm's sting, lizard's leg and owlet's wing, for a charm of powerful trouble like a hill broth boil and bubble. Well, this is very, very interesting. So I'll let you do it. Somebody else want to do one of these? That's all right. That's all right. So we get down here to the very famous double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. And here Hecate comes back in. All right. So Macbeth has gone to them again. Hecate knew he was going to come and anticipated it. Okay, so he comes and asks his question. Answer me what I ask you. Speak, demand, we'll answer. Say, if thou rather hear it from our mouths or from our masters. Now, who is she talking about there? That they conjure up these apparitions. There are 3 different apparitions who answer him here. Call him, let me see him. And then they play around with the cauldron here, pouring sow's blood that have eaten her 9 pharaohs, grease that's sweating from the murderer's gibbet, throw into the flame. Oh, horrible stuff. To take the blood of a sow who's eaten her babies. It's nasty stuff.
It's considered the darkest out of all Shakespeare plays.
Oh yes, no question about it.
And
Very much so.
wasn't there something about the origins? It's when his son died, or after his. They were saying something like that. Some experience he had ended up leading him to writing this so dark.
Things got darker as he got towards the end of his life, but Hamnet, his son, was more represented by Hamlet, I think, than by anything in here. But indeed, things did get dark. But then he had other things that went the opposite direction. The Tempest, for example. Very, very good. Okay. Speech, but say thou not. So the apparition comes and says, don't speak, just listen. Macbeth, 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 beware Macduff, beware the Thane of Fife, dismiss me enough. Okay, so what about Macduff? Well, indeed, Macduff is going to be his bane. And we know that to be the case. And Macduff also is not born of woman, right? As we discover later. Okay, for thy good caution, thanks. Thou hast harped my fear aright. But one word more, is that he will not be commanded. In other words, he wants to ask another question. No, don't ask another question. Here's another more potent than the first. So we get another apparition. This one is a bloody child. Macbeth, Macbeth, Macbeth. Had I 3 ears, I'd hear thee. Be bloody, bold, and resolute. Laugh to scorn the power of man, for none of woman born shall harm Macbeth. Okay. Of course, it ends up being true, but he is led to believe that he is immortal, or at least proof against their enmity. Then live, Macduff. What need I fear of thee? And indeed, of course, that's the wrong conclusion to come to. He comes to the wrong conclusion each time, right? But yet I'll make assurance, double sure, and take a bond of faith. Thou shalt not live, that I may tell pale-hearted fear it lies, and sleep in spite of thunder. Okay, and then the third apparition, a child with a crown and a tree in his hand. He's holding the tree. Well, isn't that interesting? Because, and then he says, that rises like the issue of a king. Well, what is this that rises like the issue of a king and wears upon his baby brow the round top of sovereignty? Who is this child wearing the crown? Listen, but speak not to it. Third apparition. Be lion-mettled proud and take no care. Who chafes, who frets, who where conspirers are. MacBeth shall never vanquished be until great Burnham Wood to high Dunsinane Hill shall come against him. Okay, Burnham Wood is the forest there, and is it going to climb the hill to Dunsinane? Well, here this portent is holding a tree. Isn't that exactly what it's showing him what could happen? Because, of course, all the soldiers end up holding branches in front of them as they march up the hill. Okay. One thing, tell me, if your art can do so much, shall Banquo's issue ever reign in this kingdom? Seek to know no more. And indeed, Banquo's progeny do eventually become kings. One of whom is, I believe, actually sovereign at the time Shakespeare wrote this, Charles I, I believe, but I'm not sure. I will be satisfied, deny me this, and an eternal curse fall on you. Let me know why sinks that cauldron, and what noise is this? Oh, where are we?
These are the visions after it.
Yeah, we've jumped to another part there.
No, isn't this after the the apparitions? Yeah. Then they say, "Show me more," and they go, "Show, show, show," and then shows death and the.
Right. Okay, the witches wind things up here. Your antique ground that may kindly say our duties did his welcome pay. Now, here there are calls for songs and dances. And this is one of the assumptions that this was added afterwards by someone other than Shakespeare. In fact, songs and dances don't really seem to fit well with the content of it at this point, but there's a good deal of reference to that. And again, the assumption was that in order to make it more palatable to this particular public, you wanted more witches. They liked the witches, but they also liked the song and dances, so they threw all of those in to try to make it a more acceptable or more palatable play. Now, you have heard about the curses attached to the play, have you not?
Yeah.
Good. Indeed, among players, it's never to be referred to by its name. And in fact, to this day, players won't refer to the play as Macbeth, but call it the Scottish play, because various different calamities have taken place in the past and have been associated with the play. So it's terribly dark, and of course, understandably, perhaps has gained that kind of a reputation. Okay, now here we have another very famous scene. We're running out of time, I'm sure. We're getting close there anyway. And what is the character of Lady Macbeth? Well, she's the one who really, tells him, screw your courage to the sticking place and go on and perform the deed. But then she also suffers from contrition and is sleepwalking at night, and her gentlewoman calls in the doctor. And the gentlewoman says, "Lo you, here she comes. This is her very guise, and upon my life fast asleep. Observe her, stand close." The doctor said, "How came she by that light?" "Why, it stood by her. She has light by her continually. 'Tis her command. She doesn't want to sit in the dark. She's always got a light. And then her eyes are open. Aye, but their sense is shut." Isn't that a beautiful way of putting it? She's sleepwalking with her eyes open. What is it she does now? Look how she rubs her hands. It is an accustomed action with her to seem thus watching her hands. I have known her continue in this a quarter of an hour. And then you hear her speak. Yet there's a spot. She speaks. I will set down what comes from her to satisfy my remembrance the more strongly. I'm going to write this down so I remember it. Okay, out damned spot. You've heard that many times, one of the most famous lines in Shakespeare. Out, I say, 1, 2, why? Then 'tis time to do. It's murky. Fie, my lord, fie, a soldier and a feared? What need we fear? Who knows it, when none can call our power to account? Yet who would have thought the old man to have so much blood in him? She's recounting the arguments she gave him, and the blood. Did you mark that? And then the Thane of Fife had a wife. Where is she now? Okay, who is the Thane of Fife, and what happened to his wife?
That's
Macduff. No, isn't that Banquo?
Yeah, Banquo.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
And indeed, his wife and child were murdered. And Lady Macbeth is feeling remorseful about that, or at least she knows what she has done. More of that. You mar all with this starting. Okay. Let's see what she says. There's the smell of the blood still. All the perfumes of Arabia will not sweeten this little hand. Okay.
That was a great scream. That Judi Dench does right there in the sleepwalking was really, really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so much in this. Let's just skip to the chase at the end of the play here. Here it is. Macbeth hears of his wife's demise. We don't know exactly how she killed herself, but we're assuming that that's what happened. He's discovered that the other Thanes of Scotland have turned against him, and he still believes no one of woman born can harm him, and he will not fall until Burnham Wood comes to Dunsinane. And of course, those all take place one after another. But he, first of all, he's thinking about the pointlessness of life, and this is one of the most famous ones. Notice that I gave you a short video at the end there of Ian McKellen talking about this speech and how it should be delivered. And I found some other interesting ones online because you may be aware that Patrick Stewart did Macbeth on stage and spoke with McKellen about the interpretation of this last soliloquy here. And that was rather interesting too. Of course, he has been in a number of Shakespeare productions, which we may want to look at some point. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day. It's the last syllable of recorded time, and all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. And the way this is described by actors is, it has to sound to the audience as though they've never heard it before. And it has to feel to the actor as though he's never said it before. Now that's a hard thing to do, because of course everybody in the world has heard this hundreds of times. And indeed, one of the things one discovers about Shakespeare, and I found this, if you want to find an entire work, for example, you find a unique phrase and search it. And it works with everything but Shakespeare. With Shakespeare, almost every unique phrase in Shakespeare has become the name of a book or the name of a pub or the name of something or other somewhere in the world. And you'll just find it all splattered all over the place. There's one wonderful little company that calls itself Sound and Fury, for example. So all of these unique, wonderful little phrases have gained their own existence in a different way. Okay, any questions at all? We have we dispatched MacBeth adequately here? Does anybody have any thoughts about it? Okay, there's wonderful language in there, but indeed it's a terribly dismal play, isn't it? I mean, and it's definitely evil. It's there's no redeeming qualities in there. I mean, there's retribution, and perhaps valid retribution on the part of some, but there's no necessarily altruistic motives on anybody's part. Okay, let's go back to our agenda. I think maybe here. Yep. Okay. Let me figure out what we're going to be doing for next time. Again, let's do another one of these mini debates, if we could. Got any subjects you think would be worthwhile? Okay, we've got a great long list up there, and that was fine to choose one there. But
and next time we should try, if Jack's here, we could try like a team. So two people on one side.
It would be nice. And indeed, I don't know if, let's look and see if Jack is out there. No, I don't see. But yeah, that would be worth doing one way or the other. Well, let's just see how it works. And if you know anybody else who's interested in the class, let them know so that we can do some of our thespian endeavors here a little more effectively with more players. I'm sorry I end up doing so much. I should leave it to you folks. If there are specific recitations you would like to do, by all means, let me know. Let me know ahead of time so that we can schedule around it and make sure that it works, because a recitation is just as effective and is just as worthy of credit as writing something and handing it in. And in many ways, it's more important. I would like, for example, to hear you recite your own work, as well as hand it in written, but to present it orally, because that's what gets it in your ear. That's what chases things out like all the time. You see what I mean? You don't use like in your writing. Let's learn to use that formality of expression in our speech as well as in our writing, if that makes sense. Okay, let's wind things up. I just want to figure out what we need to have. Are you getting enough homework?
Yeah.
It's adequate. Okay. Do we want to look at another Shakespeare play? We don't have to do so right away, but it might be nice to determine which one.
I think Romeo and Juliet was next.
Romeo and Juliet,
right?
that would be a good one, I think, to choose. We didn't do that last year, did we?
No.
Okay. That would be new for all of us. That'd be good. Okay, so let's do Romeo and Juliet. I don't know how many versions are out there online, probably several, but probably missing more popular ones. Have you all seen the 1968 version, the Zeffirelli Romeo and Juliet?
No, I haven't seen any Romeo and Juliet
If we
movie.
can find that one, it would be nice.
Oh, that one's awesome.
It is remarkable,
That's
isn't it?
just,
You know what it
It's
did? It
just
took an entire
sumptuous.
generation of high school and college students and it made them sit around in the dark in parties and turn on
Yeah.
the record and listen to
watching
it.
that one. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely
that one,
amazing.
I got the recording of it and I was listening to the recording. It's just-
Exactly, that's all
I
there
can
was at the
see
time.
it in
was the
my
record.
mind,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, oh, that's an incredibly.
Anyway, I'm afraid that one probably isn't out there for us all
I
to
bet
find.
it is on Netflix.
Oh, it would be on Netflix, but the question is it out on YouTube somewhere?
Oh,
And so
I
it
kinda
has been
doubt
on
it, but
YouTube, and I've downloaded it, but I have no way of
amazing
sharing
it
it.
shows up on YouTube.
Yeah, the trouble is those things that are popular enough to have commercial potential tend to be taken down or have
Oh,
prices put on them.
oh, absolutely, yeah, there's a license on that one, for sure.
So that's one good one. There are many other good ones, however. But Zeffirelli took the play. He cut out an awful lot of it, which is unfortunate because it's all very nice. But he took it to its natural conclusions and drew some conclusions about what the characters would indeed be doing given the environment in which they existed. And I think did a very fine job of that. Anyway, it's a remarkable version. I'll find it and others if I can and just see how that works. Okay, so Romeo and Juliet, you folks will choose a debate topic, right? Just let me know what you want it to be, and if you've chosen it ahead of time, I'm assuming that we can take that perhaps a little bit further. Okay, can I give you some more listening material in addition to Romeo and Juliet? Let's find not necessarily some debate, but something to steep your ears in. I'll find something that's just good. Okay. Do you have any suggestions?
Well, I guess I would always be up for some more of the essay writing stuff.
Okay. Well, let's definitely do the essay writing. I'm thinking more of some auditory work here, which is fine. Go ahead and throw something into the essay pot, and we'll play around with it and see if we can't expand upon that. And also, if you get a chance to go look at that book, maybe you'd like to make a report on one or more of the essays in it, or some sort of derivative material. We don't want to plagiarize, but there's no better way to master the subject than to read the works of the masters. We're not going to copy them in ways we're just going to try to stand on their shoulders, perhaps, and do a little better. Okay, I think there's enough there. If you need more homework, let me know, and I will send out an assignment probably tomorrow. Okay, any questions? Okay, well, let's bring things then to a close, and we will reconvene next week.